Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Koski of Fun Day. I'm back at it once again, kicking in for you and for yours. You know how we do. And I'm gonna give a little quick backdrop before I get into this. You know what I'm saying? I got a person on my page that he always be talking that stuff about how about the Philippines. I got that stuff about on my page on a playlist the Black Pacific, or what I'm saying, Africa, the Pacific Ocean. I did a story. I did a couple stories about the Philippines. You know what I'm saying? And talking about how there's a genocide there. Now, this one guy got on my stuff, and he blase got I read 75 books and I got a degree and da 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 da. And then he said some stuff that the genocide didn't happen. Typical kind of Caucasian historian type cat to me. You know what I'm saying? Then there was some Moors over there in the Philippines. Like Moors, like they wasn't black people. Moors, like, what is you talking about? So I asked him a question: how did Islam get over there? Then they was worshiping Islam and all type of stuff in the Philippines. It was there before Christianity. You know what I'm saying? How the hell did they get there? Well, that's irrelevant. No, it's not. You know what I'm saying? Because that shoots down your argument point right there. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, this one right here deals with the Moors in the Philippines. You know what I'm saying? And this is from a Chinese source. We're going to be showing a lot of Chinese sources on this one. You know what I'm saying? So this is out of the Western realm of information. It's there, but you know what I'm saying? Not to me Western historians, a.k.a. white, and not all white people bad. I'm just shouting this dude out because he gave me a shout out. You know what I'm saying? I ain't going to say his name. But you know what I'm saying? But this is from the Chinese sources. And this is backed up, as you see, by the UN. So the UN backed this stuff. So you got a problem with the history. You know what I'm saying? Don't come check me. Come check the Chinese and go check the UN. You feel me? So let's get started on this. The immigration of Muslim descendants of North Africa from the Philippines to the mainland of China. Because once they went to the Philippines, they went to the mainland of China, as we're going to see. Moor was a minority from Northern Africa in the Middle Ages. Moro is an application for Muslims in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and Hawaiian nationality, was a new minority which appeared in China after the Yuan Dynasty. Except for their common belief in Islam, there's no association among them. During the summer of 1988, traveling all over the Letter province of China, I interviewed many Chinese descendants of the Eastern King of Sulu to collect material for my master's dissertation. The Eastern King of Sulu Islands and the Haichi community of Binyang, at the time, Yao Ewan, the 16th generation grandson of the East King, who was chairman of the People Political Consultative Conference in the Gulu area, Kafan and Hanfang province, said to me, "It is said that our ancestors are the Moros of the Philippines. Before they came to the Philippines, they were Moors from Africa." Now, this is the 16th king generation son of the king of Sulu, which is the Moorish province of the Philippines, right? He said, I'll repeat again. He said that our ancestors are the Moros from the Philippines. Before they came to the Philippines, they were Moors from Africa. I just smiled to the answer what he said. I thought this was only a fantastic story like the Arabian Nights. 5 years later, I looked at hundreds of reference books, some data relating to this problem, and began to reflect on it quietly and earnestly. Instead of regarding that strange story, I got more and more convinced of its truthfulness. Part 1, the origin of the Moors. Western research has done a lot of research work on the history of the Moors on which they are agreement. Let's look at some of the records. Moor, a vague term generally used to indicate Muslim inhabitants of Spain during the Middle Ages. They may also refer to the North African Arabs in general and to the Arab tribes of northern Morocco and western Algeria, especially those who claim descended from the Moors of Spain or inhabited of the modern state Marinesian. The word Moor is derived from the Latin word Moris, probably Latinized form of the native name. Moor is an imprecise term that has been donated to various peoples of North Africa, Spain, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines, and Muslims in general. The Latin word Moors was applied by the Romans to the inhabitants of Northwest Africa, Mauritania. Its uses was revived by the Europeans to denote North African Berbers and Negroes who were converted to Islam by the Arabs in the 7th century. When the descendants of the Moors settled the Iberian Peninsula in the 8th century and intermarried with the Iberians, they too became known as Moors. Art and culture of the Iberian civilization is still referred to as Moorish. Gradually expelled from Spain at the beginning of the 11th century, many settled again in northern Africa and continue to be called Moors by the European. This term was also applied to Muslims encountered by the Portuguese and Spanish explorers in Ceylon and East Asia. Moors are Mauritanians who reside in the open, smooth areas of the Sahara Desert. In addition, some Moors live scattered in Senegal, Mali, Mauritania's neighboring countries, who mix with Berber blood, Arab, and Black, and have a population of Islamicized speaking Arabians and guarded as Bamadian, are monadic people, and they travel all over the world in their monadic life. Because of large-scale migration, conquest by other nationalities, and other complicated historical reasons, the modern Moors have different communities and tribes. Moor, or Maori in Latin, comes from the Greek words "semervus," or black. It is an application of the Mauritanian natives by the ancient Romans. In the early ages, it was an application of Muslims, most of the town people in the Iberian Peninsula, in the western part of North Africa by Western Europe. This application is also used by Arabians in colonial expressions. Some of the modern Mauritanians are called Moors. The records show about the Moors in many books, which are similar to the similar quotations above. Simply Moor, Moro in Spanish, coming from the Latin Mari and the Greek Moros, is an application of community and nationality which is formed by mixed blood of Arabians mixing in northern Africa, Spanish, Berbers, the native African natives, and the blacks who believe in Islam. The term Moor was originally used by the Spanish, implying discrimination to a degree. Mori in Latin means wilderness. Moros in Greek means black. In 647, shortly after Muhammad founded Islam, persecuted by natural religion, Sage informed his followers, "Please scatter all over the world, and Allah will make you together soon." The followers asked, "Where's the place to go?" The sage pointed to Abyssinia. Afterwards, Muhammad's successors commanded troops across the Red Sea and occupied all the territory which belonged to the Berbers, so that the North Africa was rapidly Islamized. Introduction to Islam, Arabian language and culture to his own nation, Berbers also learned armed expansion just like the Arabians. In the beginning of the 9th century, they occupied Spain in the name of religion. So Moor is a conquering nationality instead of a conquered one. Moors created the famous Andalusian civilization. In the Arabian digits from 0 to 9 are one of its achievements. But to the Spanish, it's shame of subjugating its nation, so they call the conquering Moors, the conqueror Moors, and refer to Andalusian civilization as Moorish civilization, meaning that the Moors were a barbarous people, and they were created as a barbarian culture. Spain bitterly hated the Moors, so the Pope Alexander II declared in 1063, "We will pardon whoever struggled with Spanish Muslims in the movement of the Christians recovering their lost territory." So if you kill one of the Spanish nation in layman terms, if you kill the Spanish Muslim according to the Pope, you was going to heaven. The mixing of Arabian Berbers and the other ancient nations produced a strong nation in the Middle Ages, which was accomplished by forced immigration and conversion to Islam. It is similar to the formation of the Chinese Huam. This new nation, speaking Arabian, wearing Arabian clothes, believe in Islam, regard themselves as Arabian, and are called Moors or Arabian Moors. They established their state and power in North Africa, such as Morocco, Algiers, Morocco 788, Algiers 761, Tunis 800, and later Egypt and Libya until 940. They established their own Islamic dynasties. In the 13th century, there were 13 Muslims dominated town between Mogadishu and Kalamazoo, which were prosperous because on one hand, they were collecting and distributing harbors for inland goods, On the other hand, they would transport stations of cargo, which is shipped from India, Malay, East Indian islands, therefore laying the foundation for Muslim dominance to dominate Northern Africa. From the above statement, we can conclude that the Moor, a synonym or derogatory term, refers to the new Muslim that was formed in the 7th, 8th, and 9th century by means of Muslim territorial expansion. From all the references which we can get our hands on, we can find that the Moors, no matter where they come from, Morocco, Libya, Egypt, or Mauritania, never go beyond the scope of Africa. Eastern Muslims were never included in the past Muslim population statistics. However, their numbers would have greatly succeeded several millions. Part 2, the possibilities of the Moors entering into the Philippines. To answer this difficult and important question, it is necessary for us to continue to consider the situation in the world around the 10th century. From the 7th century to the 13th century, 2 civilization centers were formed simultaneously on Asia and the African continents. In East Asia, the foundation of 2 empires, Tang and Song, one after another, conquered Asia-Pacific area. In the West Asia, the Arab Islamic Empire became overlord over West Asia, Europe, and Africa after the Sacred Fight. The 2 powerful kingdoms soon got in touch with each other directly. When mentioning history, all the scholars quote the words of the historical thesis of the world by Wells, a great historian. When Islam is established, Muhammad wrote to China, Persia, and Eastern Rome, explaining that Islam and seeking support. In 628, a group of notable emissaries, the Arabs sent by Muhammad, came to Canton by way of commercial ships from Medina, presenting letters to Tang Zone. This year was just the 2nd year of Zhenguan in the Tang Dynasty. Through various studies, Chinese scholars have proved the possibility of Muslims coming to China this year, and that they fit the Western records. Even it's based on the traditional 2nd year of the Yang Hu, 651. Islamism has spread into China at least by the middle of 7th century. So Islam had been in China by at least by the 7th century AD. It was through the famous Silk Road of the sea that Islam spread to the east. Now, the famous Silk Road of the sea, remember, we had to float boats. The Arabs were a commercial nation. Islam advocated the spirit of the commercial spirit. During the several centuries after the Arab-Islam Empire was established, Muslim businessmen began to monopolize the east-west trade on the Silk Road. On the sea, limited by ship-making techniques and sailing experience, this commercial line was connected through different places. Businessmen started on various ports of the Red Sea, arrived at Caravan or Jeddah of India, came to Malaysia Islands through the Nakbar Islands, and through the Madras, and then turning north, landing in Champa or Guangzhou, and it took 2 years for their return journey. There are 2 problems worth mentioning from the 19th century, when this sailing line was most busy. Firstly, in the recent years, a large number of Chinese porcelain wares and Kong of the Tang and Song dynasty were found in Northern Africa and East Africa by archaeologists. And this shows that at the time, Chinese exchange with the areas controlled by the Moors was quite frequent. The Mumagano mentioned in Chinese history is a book. In fact, it is another translation of Maghreb. Now, Maghreb, Maghrib, is Northwest Africa. You know what I'm saying? You look that up. This area we're talking about. It is the general name of Northern Africa Islamic area controlled by the Moors. Ships made by Guanabagano were tremendous and were called MOORS ships. One ship could contain several thousand of people, and there were drinking stores. The Moors, as a nation with Islamic commercial spirits and blood heritage of the Arab businessmen, undoubtedly were the forerunners and the main characters in transportation in the Tang and Song dynasties. In the 10th century, Bhutan and the southern Philippines sent an emissary to China presenting Kandor slaves, the African Negroes as studied. So the word Kandor or Kunalun, I got a video on that, you know what I'm saying? Check the page, I got a video on that one too. Because that's how they got the black slaves and all that stuff, you know, over there to China stuff, you feel what I'm saying? You know, The candle the African Negro as studied was possibly sold by Moro businessmen. And this shows African had come to the south of the Philippines. Just because of their civilization with Orthodox Arabian Islam businessmen. The Arabian language in Islam gradually became the local North African citizen language and religion. The North African culture became part of the Arabian culture. As time passed, it was difficult for people to distinguish the Arabians from the natives. The Chinese didn't distinguish them according to modern ethnology. Secondly, as the Silk Road and the sea was connected through different places, commercial ships had to stop on ports on the way. They were being supplied with water and food and having wind-broken ships repaired. Sometimes they wait for the wind to change directions, or for some other reasons, they can't continue sailing. Many of the ports in the islands became transfer trade stations. Muslim businessmen had stopped at these ports and islands, and thusly brought the first Islamic traces to the local people. In addition to China, to some Indian coastal areas such as Kanvar, the Arabian Persian businessmen settled down there since the 9th century. It has been a long-time trade relation with Indonesia. The spread of Islam through these areas proved this view. Then what about the situation in Southeast Asia? It should be entirely garrison place for Muslim businessmen according to the above deduced situation. But still today, most conservative scholars think that the earliest time of Islam to spread to Southeast Asia will be at the end of the 13th century, because they found in a tombstone of the first Sumatra king who died in 1297, engraved in the Islamic calendar the year 635, in the Islamic name Sudan Maskar. Even if it was so, the calculated year was wrong, because the Islamic calendar year 635 is 1238 and not 1297. Some have concluded from this, Islam spread to the Philippines, firstly to the Salute, and in the beginning of the 13th century. Of course, this is not correct. In this aspect, scholars have neglected an important fact, and that at the time of the East Asian China and South Asian India were culturally advanced areas. They were already matured in language, written words, and a complete system of compiling of historical works. So it's easy to find the records of Muslim businessmen coming to the East. There are great piles of materials to prove when Islamists lived abroad, or when they settled down in this country. The natives on many islands, archipelagos, and peninsulas had no complete written words, or they had no recording systems such as the Zulu. Thus, they couldn't identify the time with the East Asian or the North African Muslims first came, so that the aspects appeared to be thoroughly drowned in history. It's luck that a stone tablet remained. In fact, the earliest Muslim stone tablet in Southeastern Asia is a tomb tablet from Champa from 1039. Now, sidebar on that, Champa is Cambodia, Vietnam, the southern part of that, you know what I'm saying? Below the 17th parallel. Otherwise, everybody considered the Muslim Spanish to Southeast Asia was 700 years later until the Western advanced nations came to open up the Eastern colony and found themselves resisted by thousands of armed Muslims. As a matter of fact, Southeast Asia was the only road for Asian Arabs and North African Muslim business to come into China. Almost all the books about the ocean road clearly record this fact, whether they were Chinese Tang, Shu, Sung, or Si, on contemporary Muslims, including Moors. India, China travel notes, and in the Book of Roots and Providences, for instance, the Book of Roots and Providences record that the taxi commercial goods arrived in the Malaysian Peninsula. They contributed to travel what is referred to as Java, Borneo, and Torlisi, Torlat, Jolo Islands, and Makulu Archipelago, and the Maduro Islands. The book also pointed out that there was sailing from the Philippines to various ports in China, from Mindoro to Zhangzhou or to Guangzhou through Campa. Some archipelagos in Southeast Asia were the place where Muslim businessmen moored. There were some of the smallest living compact communities of the Muslim businessmen and several posts on the way to China in the 9th century. One thing scholars have paid attention to is Xingzhou incident. Who recall the leader of the peasant army killed 220,000 Muslims. Businessmen still remain there. Commercial ships met in the post in Southeast Asia dealing with goods. The Longsong Islands, especially the Sulu Archipelago in the south, were connected with the Malay Archipelago and had close relationships in ancient times. The slavery state Sulu appeared before the 10th century, and it became a trade center for the Southeast Asia area. It had commercial relations with Champa, Winston Lasane on the Continental Islands, and commercial trade from Cambodia, China, and Sumatra more in the ports of Sulak. So it's not surprising that the Arabs and the Moros traded with people on the island and preached there during this period. Archaeological findings, archaeological studies have proved the possibility of Muslims in the Philippine archipelago before the 10th century and provide examples too. In recent times, a large number of porcelain wares were unearthed everywhere in the Philippines. Porcelain wares belonging to the late Tang Dynasty was found on the Sulu Island and Jolo. Some of these porcelain wares in the Tang Dynasty was transferred to the Philippines by Arabian businessmen. Nowadays, the ochre engraving art in the South Philippines originated from the Middle Eastern Omar Dynasty in the 8th century and brought to the Philippine Islands by the Arabians. It is strange that some scholars arbitrarily drew conclusions by only a few words from historical documents, saying that the Muslim activities were limited to Malay archipelago and never surpassed the eastern latitude of 110. As we now know, the spread of Islam was chiefly based on two things: holy war and preaching. It was impossible to take East Asia by means of war, but rather it was accomplished in a peaceful way. As a result, Muslim businessmen were like a transmitter and played an important role in spreading Islam in the East. It was this kind of role that was revealed through settlement, marriage with the natives, and preaching to the natives in China and India. So we have a number of reasons to believe that the Muslims have parts in the Southeast area too. The American Arab historical specialist, Philip K. Hitton, let me say his name, the American Arab history specialist, Philip K. Hitton, considered too that Islam was brought here by Muslim businessmen who was dealing with the oceanic trade in Indonesia archipelago. So the spread of Islam on the Longsong Island was completed by foreign Muslim business settlement, intermarriage, and preaching. As well as the Muslim business was Arabs, Moors, or both, depending on the individual situation. I personally believe they should be Moors, or most of them were Moors. The reason for my view will be illustrated in the third part. Part 3, Moors and Moros. Moros and Moors are synonyms in Spanish. The Chinese Encyclopedia, Volume Nation states, Moros, a Muslim nation in Southeast Philippines. Its name originates from Spanish, meaning the Islam-believing Moors had a derogatory sense of 200 million population. It seems that the Spanish and Spanish history documents play an important role in the Eastern Moro and developed from the North African Moor. At the time, Moro was calling another name at the time for Moro as another was calling the name of Philippine Muslims, was first documented about the 16th century after the Spanish sailed around the world. Some scholars now think it's a colloquial term. Moros for the 500,000 Philippine Muslims were the same name given by the Spanish when Magellan founded the Philippine archipelago in 1521. Why they were called Moros? Because they dressed up like Moors from Spain. This right here, like we said before, I'm gonna take a quick sidebar right quick about how, the 500,000 Philippine Muslims was given a name by the Spanish when Magellan founded the Philippine archipelago in 1521. And why were they called Moros? Because they dressed like Moors from Spain. You will hear a whole lot of Spanish explorers. Well, this Spanish, I ain't gonna call them explorers because they didn't discover shit. You know what I'm saying? But a whole lot of Spanish people that went out, Spanish and Portuguese, to the New World and to Asia, they would see why these Moors everywhere. Moor meaning black. Let's get back down to it. Why? Because they dress like people from Spain. The Spanish were resisted staunchly by the chief Muslims of the southern Philippines, and there was grievous and heavy losses. So in his letter to the head of the military exposition, Philip II, the Spanish king, wrote with deep hatred, "I'll allow you to enslave these Moros and take their property by force." Comparatively speaking, in the time of Moros, a self-calling name by the Philippine Muslims had been recorded a little later in documents. In about the mid to late 16th century, when the Muslims from all the islands resisted the Spanish and began to win, the typical Moros would never go unarmed. Every one of them was brave enough and not a bit afraid of death. If analyzed chronologically, the appearance of the self-calling and the name called by the others in the document, we will wrongly conclude that firstly, the Spanish called them Moros in order to engage in a united fight against Spanish. The Muslim borrowed Moros as a name, even if they didn't know the derogatory sense of the Spanish language, and formed a series of Moro resistant organizations. This explanation, as well as the ambiguous description that accompanies it, has been accepted by most people. The history about the Philippines stated on page 25. Ancient Spanish called the Muslims from Africa to Spain Moros. Later, Spanish colonists employed the same name to call the Islamic Mayans. This is called by the colonialists who discriminate against the Philippines and regard them as enemies. Here is a psychological problem. That is, what nation is willing to employ the name used to abuse them by others as their own name? Moreover, this conclusion is based on the premise that local Moors lacked their own written words when the Spanish came to the Philippines. And this premise itself is unbelievable. Thus, the conclusion must be wrong. In fact, long before the Spanish came to the eastward, the Muslims in the South Philippines had their own language and words. Limited by language and territories, some scholars have only found the related records in Chinese. In his Yang Husa Zi Lu, Volume 2, Ji Guyu wrote about the Suluk in the Ming Dynasty. There is a small country named Sulu to the southwest of the Longsan Archipelago in northeast of Borneo. It consists of 3 islands, and it is small, but there's a large population there, and it is Wu Lin Yu nationality. Now we're gonna go to the Chinese sources that claim what they are. In the books, so y'all can look these books up and get them translated yourself. In his Gu Chao Ro Wan Ji, Volume 3, Wang Zi Chung wrote about the Sulu in the Ming Dynasty. The country of Sulu consists of Wu Lei Yu Ru, a nationality, and it needs 120 days from Zemin commercial ships to reach there. In his Chung Chang Zi Wu, Volume 8, Wen Ten Shi wrote, I once got to the Wu Lang Yu letters, and it's almost the same as the Arabian language. So they're admitting that the language of this people is the same as the Arabian language. These are Chinese scholars. You got a problem with it? Go talk to them. Go to Beijing, and it's backed up by the UN. Go talk to them. The Ming Dynasty of China once set up an organization, Xi Yi Nguyen, which was in the change of the reception of the border countries, as well as transferring various official dispatch and articles sent by foreigners. In the 10th volume of the Xi Yi Yang Qi Zi Xi, which is a textbook for all those translators, the written language of the foreign countries as Sulu were clearly recorded, and in a Chinese poem was translated into Wu Lei Yu language of Sulu. The language mentioned by the Wen Ti Si as the Arab letter. Nowadays, the minority believing in Islam in the South of Philippines are used to the Arab letter spelling language, and this split the historical records. Here we get to know the name Wu Li Yu, the name of the Philippine Muslims, and the Chinese history book. The reason for the Chinese people call them Wu Lang Yu instead of other names is that the Chinese had a way of translating foreign names by imitating the sounds of the word more. Because of the difference of language, Easterners can easily make mistakes in spelling when they translate the name in Western documents. For example, the letter M in a prefix and a miffix is often mistakenly written as we and vice versa. H in Chinese is seldomly or likely announced. Kampa is spelled Kamparu. The sound translation Kowloon. Romy is spelled as Ronin. The sound translation New Orleans. And Mesa is spelled Hista with a sound like a Wu system. The same as Moro. It is spelled Horo and is translated as Wu Lang Yu. In another word, the Wu Lang Yu is Chinese sound translation of the Philippine word more during the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644. Another problem emerged before us. Because of the frequent exchanges between the Chinese and Philippine Muslims, the Chinese people had known they were Moors and it translated it into Yu Lang Yu, and began to study the language, which had similar written letters with the Arabian language more than a century before the Spanish had conquered the Philippines. The fact is enough to overthrow the view that the Moro is the given name of the Philippine Muslims by the Spanish in the 16th century, and enough to prove that the Moro is a self-called name instead of being called by others. A nation employs its name with various nation, countries, and areas as its own name, and most probably because it wants to show its own characteristics or how far back date the relation. This is one consistent of the research of nationality. For instance, overseas, the Chinese mainly live in Chinatowns or Chinatown areas. The Muslims who migrated from Yuan to North Thailand call themselves Chin Ho or Chin Hock, etc. In the same way, the Moros, as a self-called name, will surely have some relation with the North African Moors in orientation. Scholars generally think when the spread of Islam spread in Southeast Asia, they were accompanied by a large number of immigrants. There were some Muslim immigrants living in a compact community in Shulu. Some were businessmen among them. This again proved what we had discussed in previous parts, the possibility of the Moors entering the Philippines. According to research, the Philippines entered the East in 14th century, earlier than the Spaniards. Their intention was to obtain great profit from the spice trade. They learned to take over and monopolize the trade from the Moors. In 1514, the Portuguese governor wrote and reported the coastal areas are controlled by the Moors from the Southeast Asia. This description shows that for a long time before the Spaniards came, the Moors were very active on the Silk Road. It was seen a fairly convincing view, and from the origination of the word Moro would be likely this, because variations of the way of going on the east along the Silk Road on the Silk Road of the sea. The North African Moors and Arabs settled down in Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, and brought Islam to above mentioned areas as well as the name Moro. But not only the Philippines, but also South Asia, Southeast Asia, Muslim groups who refer to themselves as Moros had close relations with the North African Moors, immigration, and preach. Since modern and current times, the Muslim anti-government organization in the South Philippines, such as the Liberation Front of Moors, have had very close relation with the Moors founding countries in a history such as North African Egypt, Morocco, and Libya. This sufficiently proved the statement that the Moros originated from Northern African Moors. For instance, the Philippines, the Muslim separation movement, not only headquarters of the Moro resistance organization and a place of negotiation between two opposite representatives, were set up in North Africa, but also the president of some Islamic countries become spokesman for the Moros. So they saying right here they got a front organization that go way back to Northern Africa. You know what I'm saying? Back to the Maghreb. You should say. You know what I'm saying? Part 4. The Moros migrating to China. The Ming Dynasty. When Emperor Xingzhu was in power, 1402 to 1424, Xing was asked to command a colossal fleet to visit the Western world. In ancient China, it was referring to Southeast Asia, for 7 times to show Chinese strength and richness. In 1409, during the third voyage, Xing village Sulu was established by the Muslims situated in the south of the Philippines. In 1417, a delegation paid a visit to China led by Padu Patala, Sulu East King, Maharaj Kamatanalan, and West King Paduka Prabhu, wife of the Tang King. The delegation consisted of more than 340 people. Driving the ships, they crossed the Bishidi Straits and the Taiwan Straits. And after landing at Quanzhou, the Fujian province, they traveled along the Great Canal and at last arriving at Beijing. Before returning to their homeland, they stayed in Beijing for 27 days. The emperor bestowed great money and silk on them. On the way to Dizhao, the Shandong province, Zulu East King was dead due to illness. According to the adequate words to the king, the Ming Dynasty government buried him at Dunhuan. His first son returned and succeeded to the throne, in Guanamene, the queen, Andula. And Guanamene, the queen. Anadulu, the second son, and Wanatala, the third son, remained to look after the tomb. Because they believe in Islam, Jia, Ma, and Chen, the 3 Hu families migrated here from nearby land Swing to serve them. Then these Muslims, Sulu Moros, married with the Hulu nationalities and multiplied from there. Using An and A Win as their first name. Using An and A Win as their first names, they settled there. A natural village with the Moros blood heritage was born nearby East King's tomb, Beijing. In 731, the descendants of the Sulu king acquired Chinese nationality officially. In 1730, the Sulu king, King of Sulu, one of the descendants of Durham, who was the first to visit the Sun East King, paid a visit to China. He stopped in the zoo to announce to commemorate his ancestor. At that time, the East King tomb looked very desolate after 300 years. After arriving in the capital, he wrote to the Chinese emperor to innovate the tomb. Yangzing, the Chinese emperor, thought the Sulu should be praised because they paid tribute to the Chinese imperial court, although they were not from China. So he ordered the local officials of the Zizao to clear the tomb. A head was chosen from the Wen and An families and dressed in official clothes. The government informed us in another way of renovations. In June 1733, Sulu Dalan wrote to the Chinese emperor, acquiring as the descendants of the Sulu East King in China. The emperor approved the request, and in July 735, Wen Li, one of East King's descendants, went to the capital to fetch a certificate. All the 175 members of the Wen and the An family attained official census of Dizhao. This symbolized the beginning of the nationalization and the nationalization of the community of Sulu Muslims in China, which had the Moorish blood heritage. During the Qing Dynasty, there were 2 well-known persons among the descendants of the Philippine Moros in Dizhao, who are now Chinese Hun. One was Wen Yang, who lived in the Kulan long period. Another was An Yang Kang in front of Yang Fing period. Wan Yang was another name for Yu Ting and lived in Dizhao to look after their ancestors' tomb. Because of his cleverness, love of study, and rich talent, in 1795, he was appointed chairman of Wuzhing Highland Province. Being good at seasoned bandits and having captured some major escapees for several times, he was promoted to Zhu Fu, superior to the county chairman in rank of Qizhou, Nangu, Anqing, and Fanying, and Anhu province. He was a high reputation in official circles. An Yu Qi, one of the descendants of the East King living in Dizhao, was appointed commander of the 10th military camp. Being famous for his bravery, he fought with Taiping uprising army in the north of the Yangtze River. In 1856, killed by uprising soldiers in the Louis battle. He won honor given by the government. Until Zhou period, the Qing Dynasty, the population of An and Wen families amounted to 285, which is 100 more than the population in 1731 when they acquired Chinese nationality. Because Zhao is located on the bank of the Grand Canal, the periodic flood forced a lot of the East Qing descendants to move to Habet, Hainan, Shanin, Zayan, Zhenan, Beijing, and Tianjin. There were two famous persons among them. Anshu, the 15th generation grandson of the Sulu East King, joined the army which was commanded by Feng Weizhang, a famous general when he was young. He was ever appointed commander of the Longdong. The Gansu province commander of the independent 18th Division and president of the Association of Huzhu Dynasty Education in Qinghai province. After that, he went into business and ran some famous companies. Wen Shu Wen is the 16th generation grandson of the Sulu East King. In order of record to the history of the East King coming to China, he began to write the history of his family, the summary of the Wen and An Dynasty families, which is about 220,000 words. It is important reference material for us to search in the history of the Moors coming to China. Till now, the descendant of the East King and Zhao have multiplied the 22nd generation grandson. The highest generation which is alive is the 16th one. Among them, there are 24 families with a population of over 100. 6 Wen families with a population of over 30. They are all Muslims. They build beautiful mosques and they live in a life which is similar to other Chinese Muslims. In order to memorize their ancestors, some of them have carved words, the generation grandson of the Philippine East Kings, on their seals. The conclusion remarks. In 1992, I paid a special visit to the Beijing village and found a lot of changes had taken place there. On the situation, the Chinese were reforming and opening. Several factories were set up by the village. They are living a better life. When I acted as a guest to the Muslim family, they asked me for development on my research about their family history. I answered seriously, perhaps your ancestors' native places not only in the Philippines, but also in remote North Africa. So, there you have it. But this is all backed up by the UN. This is the Chinese sources and stuff like that, saying that the Moors, yes, they had their own kingdoms. You know, many kingdoms of Moors kingdoms over there in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Southern Asia. The Chinese foundation, I went outside the Western one. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want no white man's hand touching on this one. Because, you know, a guy that said I could read I'll read 75 books about more, you know, Philippine history. Okay, fine. They weren't the only ones that wrote there. Let's see what the Chinese had to say. You know what I'm saying? As you said before, the Moors was writing Arabic in Philippines about the 9th, 10th century. You know what I'm saying? You got a problem with it, go check the Chinese, go check the UN. That's on you. You know what I'm saying? So the Moors is already there, Moor meaning black. And they saying they saying they themselves, according to the UN and according to the Chinese, that they come from North Africa, the Maghreb. You know, I mean, what I'm gonna do? You know what I'm saying? I can go. Where can I go any higher from that? I can't go no higher than, you know what I'm saying, in the UN. You can see it right here when I put the site up in there. It's gonna take you to the UNESCO.org. So when people come up there with that negating history about, you know, it wasn't a black planet, basically, because that's basically what they're trying to say. You know what I'm saying? The planet wasn't black. You got to push on, homeboy. You know what I'm saying? We control the pen now. Like our great ancestor Patrice Lumumba said from the Congo, the pen ain't going to be controlled by Belgium and Paris and D.C. and London no more. It's going to be controlled by Kinshasa, you know what I'm saying? You know, Port Gibson, places like that. You know what I'm saying? Australia. It's going to be controlled by people like that. The peoples of the world. You know what I'm saying? The real truth living people of the world. So, you know what I'm saying? So, that's just done on that one. So, yes, the Moors, they brought Islam to the Philippines and brought it to China, as we just seen here now, which the Chinese submit to. You know what I'm saying? You can go through here and look at the references, and you can get them Chinese books if you want to and get them translated. You feel me? Said we was over there writing. That's you know what I'm saying, floating boats and writing. You know what I'm saying? They said it was just like Arabic. You know what I mean? So there's nothing you can do about it. And the Chinese got good records from many dynasties. You know what I'm saying? So this ain't just from one Chinese dynasty. It's about for damn near 4 of them. So, yeah, I don't know what to say on that one. So this is Moors, you know what I'm saying? I don't know what I'm going to call this one, you know, whoopie woo. I'm going to figure out what to call it. But just hit the like button, subscribe. You know, I got a whole lot of information like that. You know, it's very, very few cats that can touch me on this. You know, that's not ego driven because I like to learn from everybody. But when you come up and start just come up on some other stuff, you know what I'm saying? And I'm supposed to bother that, you know, hell no. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people come on my page and disagree, which I have no problem with. But I'm not going to sit down and take no sucker shit when I know what the fuck I know. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to just add this to the collection. We're going to add some more on this. I got a couple more things on this one, too, about the Moors and the Philippines and China, using Chinese sources. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you know, donate to the movement. Hit the Cash App. You know, Okoski, ISK, Okoski. And, you know, show a lot of brother love. Hit the like on the page and all type of stuff, man. Show a brother love. Peace.